Hello and welcome to the Outtakes, the official podcast of National Student Pride, where we go behind the scenes with a series of inspiring queer people who are making a real difference, working both within and outside the community to better lives of LGBTQ plus people everywhere. On this episode of the Outtakes, we are joined by sexual health expert, educator, content creator, as well as a proud member of the LGBTQ plus community, Varuna Srinivasan. Hi, Varuna. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
We've prepared some really nice questions for you, and I think it's going to be a fun time. For those of you watching the podcast on our YouTube channel, you may have noticed we are also joined by Vismaya. Vismaya is a member of our podcast team, and she decided to crawl out the shadows for this one.
Hello.
Varuna, Vismaya is actually a big fan of yours, and she's followed your work for quite some time. So I actually thought it might be nice to get her involved on this one.
I'm loving it. I think the more the merrier.
That was my mentality.
That's the thing. I'm having such a fangirl moment because this is so important to me, with respect to representation. As a South Asian woman myself, growing up, I never imagined myself in queer spaces, even though I wanted to be in it. And I think that's mainly because I never saw anyone like me in them. And I think it's really inspiring seeing South Asian people advocate for space in the community to just be themselves. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And I'm loving the bi flag behind you. It's such an excellent background. So thank you for repping. That's amazing.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have no flag.
Yeah, Ben, you need a flag, Ben. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll send you one.
Oh, thank you. I would really appreciate that. Right. So let's kick off the interview. So, Varuna, when researching you, I came across a few of your TikToks, and I saw that you had sort of mentioned that growing up in India and being educated there, you received little to no sex education. And sort of knowing now that you are a sexual health expert, I was sort of wondering how you actually got exposed to the avenues of sort of like sex, sexuality, things like that. And what was sort of the main catalyst for sort of landing you where you are now, pretty much?
Thank you for that question. A lot of people ask me that, and I think my answer is kind of the same, that yes, there has been little to no sex education. And growing up in India, it is such a sex negative culture. And I say this because as a public health student and a lifelong learner, we kind of think about health as existing in many different spheres, right? So there's inter and intrapersonal, there's kind of the community level, and then there's the government and policy level. And so at all of these stages, I was experiencing sex negativity. And if you've read a lot about it, there is kind of an ongoing culture around oppressing women, femme, and people who identify as being from the LGBT community. And so, in just having conversations with my friends in high school, or, with my father or with my uncles, there was kind of a lot of sexual oppression going on. So it's statements like, you can't wear that leaving the house. I trust you. It's them I don't trust. Different rules for me and my brother. So my brother could go to Dubai to see his girlfriend, but I wasn't allowed to go on a sleepover. So things like that. When you go to school, you're being slut shamed for dating. And then, of course, like when you think about like the policy and the governmental level, there's no sex education. There's no spaces for us to kind of explore what it means to live and be in our bodies and think of ourselves as a sexualized being. We're almost so heavily desexualized. And I was always kind of interested in that sphere of like sexual health. And of course, I have a degree in medicine and in public health. And throughout that time, I've been working in sexual health. And so I would say it's a combination of both like personal experiences and professional experiences.
That's so interesting, because almost sort of picking on a few of the things you said there, like, do you feel like almost you were quite rebellious within the culture you were operating within? Like, how did you sort of navigate that from a young age? And was it almost a case of once you sort of left that sort of arena, you then became much more able to pursue these interests?
It's two things, right? Like, I have a positionality in society. I have access to certain privileges, right? As a thin, fair-skinned woman, who's born into an upper caste surroundings. As a South Asian, I think that those intersectionalities are really important in how they get you to where you want to be as a person. And a big part of that is credited towards, my rebellion is almost counted as like feminism. But I think a lot of people who aren't in the same situations are kind of doing the same. But I will say that, yes, I was definitely called a rebellious child growing up. I was often sneaking out of the house. I was trying to find my way in a world that was often working against me. And I'm talking in terms of like finding sexual liberation for myself, right? In like, I have a crush. I want to do things like I may have a crush on a girl. I may have a crush on a boy. Like, I want to talk to someone, I want to date them, I want to have sex with them, right? And so those are kind of my goals growing up. And they are goals for a lot of people. But I think in an Indian context, especially having grown up in Chennai, where I'm from, I'm Tamil, it is a little more conservative, I would say. I mean, we're liberal in the general sense, but it's a kind of city where if an actor, says premarital sex is not bad, her house gets egged by people in the community, which actually happened. This is a real life example. And so, yes, you're right. I think there was a general sense of rebellion where I would get angry with my teachers if they went through my cell phone. Like one of them actually went through my cell phone, went through the messages that I had, like was texting. I was telling my husband this. I was like, I got caught when I was 16 texting my boyfriend. Like it's so normal, such a normal thing. And they called my mom to the school. And I like looked at my mom and I was like, this is really dumb, right? Like this is so stupid. Luckily my mom is very understanding and she's like, okay, well, you know what? They shouldn't have done that, but we're just gonna let it slide. So yes, it was like little small acts of rebellion.
And it's like I relate to this so much because I'm from South India as well. And it's like growing up in schools, they actually measured people's skirts as well. And, I used to wear shorts at home. And if, some other male relative was coming home, I was asked to change. It's interesting just talking about how everybody has a similar experiences in the same area.
So I was sort of wondering, how is the current access to sexual health for LGBTQ plus people, especially sort of the younger population? And are we seeing any sort of change or development there?
So yes, I live in New York City, and unfortunately, we have seen continued attacks against sex education, against intersecting ideas as well, thinking about like critical race theories. They're banning books on LGBT folks, and there's a lot of anti-trans legislation happening as well. So targeting teachers who are teaching their kids about their sexual identity, right? And I think that this is what happens is that people misunderstand the word sex, right? Because I think that when you think about sex, it's almost like the closet in Narnia. Like you're looking at it from the outside and it looks just like a door and you're kind of like misunderstanding, but there's so much depth to that word, right? Because we're thinking about sexual identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, how you navigate the world, relationships, dating. Like I can go on and on and on and on. What we are doing is providing a sense of like autonomy, like bodily autonomy, and teaching them about consent, right? Because we have seen that research does show that comprehensive sex education, and comprehensive means intersectionality. So also talking about LGBT rights does lead to more tolerance in society, right? So it reduces rates of sexual assault and allows people to also imbibe dignity and respect in their society towards themselves and their peers. And honestly, I didn't have that, right? So I didn't grow up knowing what the words LGBT meant. I was exposed to trans folks, and I think my mom, of course, was a little bit more liberal in taking me to a lot of functions and spaces where trans people were visible. And so that was kind of my first foray into it. But I didn't really know what bisexual meant. I didn't know pansexuality was a thing. I didn't know agender, genderqueer was a thing. Pronouns didn't really exist in my vernacular. I was like, what is that? Of course, I'm a she, her, you know what I mean? So like, that's why I think that, I think having a sense of sex education, it's almost like my sex education happened on the internet, right? And I think for a lot of people.
I think
and
that's the case for us as well, especially our generation. Yeah. We were almost the first teenagers to have full comprehensive access to the internet. And especially I think growing up LGBT, that is your only access point. And I remember watching so many YouTubers like coming out videos and all loads of videos like that. So many BuzzFeed quizzes. Like, am I gay? Yes. It's almost like over the past decade, we have seen another sexual revolution. And I think that's what we're finding now. We're very much in the middle of that conflict of like an attack on sex, an attack on LGBTQ plus, an attack on women, because you want to call it the right or just the anti-this movement or whatever. In their eyes, we've come too far.
Yeah. I think the closest to sex education I got during my school years was my biology reproduction chapter. That's it. And a lot of words were just blurred out, even while teaching it to us. I was like, if I don't know my own body, how am I supposed to know myself? And then in university as well, a few of my classmates formed an LGBTQIA plus support group. And back then we had to take permission from the school authorities to actually do it. And I remember the backlash we got from it. And that was the first time I'd seen such backlash, because I think I was very protected. And this was the first time I saw it. And I was blown away in the sense that I was like, I didn't know this existed.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry that happened to you, because again, I think that this idea that we're teaching young kids how to have sex, I think is just so, like, it's taken so much out of context, right? Because we are just teaching them to respect their own bodies and to identify it, right?
So, like I was saying, there isn't much awareness about the LGBTQI plus community. So my question for you is, how do you think we can create more visibility and awareness for more people of color in the community, especially bisexual folks?
That is my life's work. I almost feel like oftentimes when I'm on social media, I do have a lot of videos and a lot of posts about being bisexual. And I talk about it also on my Twitter as well, where there's a lot, it's a different type of discourse and a different type of media, right? But I think this is the thing. As long as I keep showing up every single day and reminding people that I'm bisexual, I think that's creating visibility. Prefer to use the term bisexuality plus or bi plus, which includes bisexuality, pansexuality, queer, fluid, bi-curious, what have you. I think what happens in a lot of other spaces, and I think why we face a double discrimination almost, and we call confused, is because people are yet to still understand that sexuality is a spectrum, right? But I think what happens is there's a comparison almost in that we're not decisive and we haven't reached a definitive point or the pinnacle, or we haven't like scaled the mountain of sexuality. And I think bisexuality almost challenges that, right? It challenges what sexuality means. It challenges what it means to be on a spectrum. So showing up every day, talking about being bisexual, talking about your peers, talking to your peers about being bisexual. But I think visibility kind of shows up in different ways, in different forms.
I think the first I even heard with relation to, the LGBTQ plus community was homosexual. And I didn't know bisexuality or pansexuality until like the later years in uni. And I was like, and it just blew me away, because that's how much I related to it. And I was like, where was this all these years? You know what I mean? And I think it's really important, especially when you're in a heteronormative seeming relationship. And I think that's when people throw their ignorance at you the most, in a sense. And that's another question I had for you. How would you say, people can get comfortable with their bisexuality when they are in a heteronormative, seeming relationship? Like, say, if I was in a relationship with a man, how would I feel comfortable with my bisexuality in that relationship?
So that is a term that I often grapple with, that I do not like. I do not like the word passing, but I will say that passing, that, our cis heteronormative world is in fact cruel to, LGBT folks. We face a lot of discrimination, and I'm talking as a whole, as a community, but I think my gripe with the word heteronormative, especially in a bisexual or pansexual context, is often it is weaponized against bi plus folks, in that we aren't really queer enough, or that we don't really understand queer struggles. And granted, we do have access to straight spaces, right? I'll say that, to heterosexual spaces, and to, in my relationship, my husband is a cishet man, and it is easier, I mean, we're fighting for the collective breakdown of discrimination in our society to say that everyone should have access to housing, everyone should have access to socioeconomic freedom in the way that it looks for them, everyone should have access to healthcare, education, etc. In my relationship, those are things that, I can hold his hand in public, I can kiss him, and I can be in spaces, as a closeted person, and not really fear for my safety, in the sense that I have to erase myself and I have to be invisible. Just thinking about, in my relationship, and I will say this, right? I think bisexual privilege is such a myth, in the idea that because bisexual people can exist in both a same-sex relationship and, in being in a relationship with someone from like a different gender or a different sex, that it's often told that you're not really queer enough. But in my, like, we're thinking about queer love, I still call my relationship queer because one person in this relationship is still queer. That's what I'm trying to dispel and say, yes, our experiences are different, but I'm still bisexual. I'm just as bisexual as you are.
For so long, we were having these issues with representation. And what I'm thinking is amazing is social media has democratized representation. It's given people greater access to find representation and also be the representation. So almost my question to you is, how do you think having social media has impacted representation now?
I think it has, like you mentioned, has opened up a different type of ideology, right? Because for a long time, when you think about Stonewall, and I also really encourage everyone to watch Pose.
I love Pose.
It's amazing.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's so good. And
So
I will remember like a scene there where a lot of gay white men are extremely exclusionary to Black trans women and like Afro-Latino trans women, right? And so like when we thought about representation back in the day, it was really rigid. But I think what social media has done is it has opened up a kind of a diverse set of experiences. And I always say this on my page as well. If you go through my highlights, I'm happy if you find solace in my page, but I don't think that my experiences are truly representative of what it means to have intersecting identities and to be queer, right? Like I'm one of it, but I'm not all of it. And I always say diversify your mentors, diversify the people that you look up to, or the pages that, or the content that you consume, because I think that is so important. Because I'm genderqueer, but I'm not visibly trans, right? I know that bisexual people, we have a lot of mental health struggles and a lot of health issues in general. But, I think lesbian women and of course gay men face a different battle. Up until a couple of years ago, like, a decade, you couldn't get married and like show your love to your partner. And so I do think that there are different struggles depending on how you identify and what your intersecting identities look like. And I think social media has brought on a lot of different people to the stage, who are advocating for such amazing things. On my page, of course, there's a lot of like trans joy. I'm meeting a lot of queer South Asian folks. That's kind of my circle. So like South Asian trans folks, South Asian bi folks, pan folks. And I think, yes, you're right. I think social media has created like a really nice space to kind of explore that.
What was the main motivating factor for you starting these social media pages where you are educating people in the way you are? Was there a moment that you're like, right, that's it, I'm getting on TikTok?
So the pandemic had started and I was just let go from like a consulting job that I got. So before this, I was actually like in a very academic space. I was very much like building programs for organizations that kind of work in the sexual health space. And so the pandemic happened and they very bluntly said, we're going to use your salary for COVID resources within our organization. And I was like, fair enough. And then I was just like in bed one day and I like went on BuzzFeed and I followed, like there was a profile of someone who was doing like education on race, right? And so like, what is racial healing? What does Like, what is racial gaslighting? I think one of their posts, racial gaslighting, went viral. And I was like, wow, okay, so like people go on Instagram to teach other people, right? And so they can speak from their experience and they can do this. And I was a little surprised by that, because for me as a millennial, I'm 32 years old. I kind of like grew up in this age that Instagram was just posting pictures of yourself with really shitty filters. So this almost like changed my mind. And so I created a new profile and I stalked them. And then I stalked people that they were following. And I was like, oh, wow. So these graphics are cool and I can create them, and I'm a creative person. And I was like, I have the content. I just need to find a way to put it on social media. And then Reels came about like shortly after. And then there was kind of like a boom in how we perceive Instagram now. So yeah, I mean, there isn't like an amazing, like, oh my God, one day I was walking on the street and this happened. It was literally as like, this is a matter of factly. I saw someone else doing it. I was like, maybe I can also do it.
You know what's interesting? Because, you mentioned how you went on these pages and then saw whom they follow and what they do. You were that for me, because I wanted to be out there. Like, I wanted to like put myself out there and advocate for, BIPOC people in not only queer spaces, but everywhere. And I can just talk about my experiences. Maybe someone might relate to it, or maybe it just might inspire someone else to put themselves out there. And I think it's just so inspiring and amazing to have that space where you can be yourself.
Because when you are a creator like you are, you do create almost like an indirect community around you, and almost like a safe bubble for then people who all follow you to then interact with one another. And then it almost becomes this spider web of different interacting experiences that all can learn from each other. And I think that's such a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
So well done, you.
Thank you.
Because almost with my personal experience with finding representation, it sounds crazy, but it wasn't until I started watching RuPaul's Drag Race, which I know sounds ridiculous.
I'm on season 13, big fan.
But I think I started watching that probably about 16, I'd say, and it really was it gets better. It was like this little handbook on queer culture where I was able, through Drag Race, was able to then learn about the Stonewall riots. Why was Judy Garland important? Ballroom culture, like almost these little pieces of queer culture that then I was able to almost piece together and try and understand where I fit within it all. Yeah. And we've had this mass burst of representation on our screens, and I know there is still some way to go, but I think just within the last almost 10 years, from me like staring at a gay couple on EastEnders to now being a religious fan of Drag Race, like it's amazing. And I think if I had that just 10 years earlier, I think it would have made it such an easier journey.
It would have. Yeah. No, I agree with all of those things, right? I think media, and that's why I'm so interested in media. And I often talk about sexual health media because it is so vital. The narratives that we see on TV, and even like, I love shows like Sex Education. It's a British show. I don't know if you've seen it. Of course,
yeah, we have.
I've seen it twice over because I really like the spectrum. They explore asexuality, they explore a lot of different sexualities. And I think that's really cool. I mean, need different types of representation. And this is something that I talk about in bisexuality as well. As like, I get very annoyed. I've seen several shows like Sex and the City, I think talks about bisexuality as being something that's like confused or like, pick a side, I think is kind of the narrative there. And that's what you grow up watching, right? You grow up watching harmful narratives about sexuality on the screen, and you kind of like, you internalize it. And I think good queer representation is hard to come by, but when it does, I think it's life-changing.
I have come through some really weird, bisexual myths along the way as well. And I want to know, what's the weirdest or funniest bisexual myth or stereotype that you've heard?
I don't know if I would use the word funny. I find them irritating.
Let's go with ridiculous. I think.
I'll go with ridiculous. That bisexuality and polyamory are the same, or that you have to be polyamorous to be a true bisexual, I think is one of the most ridiculous ones that I have ever heard. Because polyamory, and I'll quickly explain this, it's a relationship structure where multiple people can be in a relationship with each other, and kind of breaking outside again of like a heteronormative ideology or what relationships should look like. And I think this goes back to what I said earlier. It's like bisexual people, especially bisexual women, our choices are so scrutinized, and we're often like having to prove how bisexual we are by the number of women that we have slept with.
Which is weird.
It's like, why do
Let
we
these women live.
let me live? Exactly, man. That's what I tell myself. I'm like, let me live. You do you, let me do me. Like, stop trying to like censor or try to like investigate my sex life. But I do think the polyamory thing is quite hilarious. I think bisexual people, not all bisexual people are polyamorous, right? And it really depends. You can practice polyamory, but I think that has to be the most ridiculous thing. It's like people conflating the two, because it doesn't really happen with most other like sexual orientations, right? I do know a lot of gay folks there are a lot of stereotypes associated with gay men, of course, like considering, the AIDS epidemic that happened in the 80s. I think there was a lot of harmful stereotyping around, oh, people who are sexually promiscuous get HIV AIDS, which is, kind of sad, because we could tell that, there was a lot of like HIV AIDS happening through drug use as well, or through like blood transfusions, et cetera. But the stereotype, I think what it reinforces is that queer people are inherently promiscuous and therefore have a lot of sex, have a lot of unprotected sex, are just heathens. And that's the thing though, is like, so what? So what if you're having sex with so many people? So what? As long as you're taking care of yourself and taking care of others and hopefully practicing safe sex, who cares?
It's almost like fetishizing bisexual women.
Yes, exactly. And it's like again and again and again. And I feel like it's so repetitive, but we fetishize bisexual and lesbian women. And it's interesting because a lot of the porn out there, though, so like this is an interesting statistic that I had written on my page, that a big percentage of women watch lesbian porn, but don't really like identify as being queer, but they watch it because they're trying to learn more about themselves and are trying to learn what sex, like good sex often should look like, or like sex that prioritizes your body and your needs and your pleasure should look like. And men watch it, a big portion of cishet men watch it because they're fetishizing, right? And so like even my first kiss at a party was because all the boys in the room were cheering me on to kiss. And oftentimes, like we've seen that girls do like to do that, and that's fine, you do you. But I think what ended up happening for me was I was like, oh, I like this. This is cool. Like I want to keep kissing you and I want to keep kissing girls. But yes, I think we do live, I think especially bisexual women do live with this like fetishizing, we're stared at in public, people make us feel uncomfortable. I don't think anyone's sexuality exists for the consumption of other people, right? And that's what I have to keep reminding people, is that I have ownership over my sexuality. Every bisexual person has ownership over their sexuality, and it is not for your consumption or your scrutiny.
I think it's really nice to have someone who just gets it, like who has been through these things that I immensely relate to. And I think it's just cool and inspiring. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. You keep doing what you're doing. I think with the National Student Pride and of course the Outtakes podcast, and I mentioned before that I think media plays such a big role, and you are being the representation now for younger kids in middle school, high school who are going through it, and they go on the internet, they're going to find your podcast. So thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Varuna, thank you so much. It has been such an honor having you on, allowing you to share your wisdom, your experiences, and it has been truly such an amazing experience. So thank you guys for listening to this episode of The Outtakes with Varuna Srinivasan. She is amazing. Go check out her page on Instagram and on TikTok. We will put all the links down below. So thank you very much, Varuna. Have a lovely rest of your day. And thank you for taking the time to appear on our little podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.